Hey, continue on. I was just gonna look a little bit here at. I remember the name of the person that was attacked by these bots way back in the days, and I think it was probably even before 2001. This is probably back in '98 or '99. It's the grc.com site. The guy that does SpinRite, to my mind, was the first guy that I remember seeing detecting the fact that these bots exist. Right now, it's a national security issue because probably the full power of even 20 or 30 or 300. No, this reporter says that they think that the Wallodeck botnet, which is smaller than what Storm was, infected 390,000 machines out there. And if you direct if you send junk network packets from 390,000 machines against this nation's infrastructure, we're probably going to have some kind of problem being able to retaliate, deal with the attack, some enemy attack, right? So it's a national security issue. And one thing you could do is not just run a virus scanner for national security. Probably take the disk out and put it in another computer with a freshly installed virus scanner and analyze it from there, or maybe from Linux. I keep forgetting what it was. I was going to talk about Rick Moen's discussion about why viruses aren't spreading in amongst Linux machines. Still, even if Linux machines, one point he does make, and most of these ideas are for him, and if I misquote him, well, it's my fault. It's not Rick Moen's fault. So I'll just say right now, what I'm saying is it's my attempt to summarize what he said. But if you want to see actually what he said, it's linuxmafia.com /Rick fac index php page equals virus, or you can just search Google for Rick Moen virus, and it'll take you to Rick's rants. And I'll just try to touch some of the points he has here. And basically what he's saying is, if you have a Linux box, you probably don't have to get it. He says you don't have to get a virus scanner if you have a Linux box. Or if you're surfing the net with Linux, you don't have to worry about it. And he goes into a little bit talking about how, if you're used to living in that world, you can't conceive of a world without it. But let's just get down to what it says. He said the first point that he makes that I think is important is that on my Linux machine, I did something on permissions yesterday. This is kind of tied into having permissions. And one of his points is, it doesn't address the idea if a box is rooted, I don't think, but he may have other things to say about that. No way am I doing this to refute Rick Moen. I'm looking at this as authoritative. I think he's far more skilled than I am. Quote, by contrast, on Linux or any other Unix, your processes cannot harm the machine or damage other users' files because you yourself cannot. So, to demonstrate that, I'll just go, I'm the user Jack in this case, and if I try to go into root's home directory, it says I could not enter the folder as information, but it's blank. Well, trust me, that's not a blank folder. There are items in there. I just can't see them. Even if I could see them, it doesn't mean I'd be able to delete them. Basically, because of user permissions that go along with Linux. Now, sometimes these permissions cause usability problems. As I showed with my mounting the other drives demonstration. I want to be able to get to files on my other Ubuntu installation from SUSE in my own home directory. And if I do that, I gotta be, gotta have permission to do so, which means my user in SUSE has to be the equivalent of the user in Ubuntu. Okay. So it could cause problems. Sometimes things won't run because there's a permissions problem that you can't see. It could be, it could involve, yeah, there could be some problems with it, but also it keeps the system safe, and also keeps your machine from becoming part of a very powerful and potentially scary threat to just about anybody in the world. It's a lot of power to wield, too much power to wield. I think something needs to be done about this. A lot of the IRC servers are being taken offline because before the IRC was being used for this, but now they're using some kind of HTTP protocol to communicate their commands between their different rooted machines. Now, if a Linux user, another point he makes. If a Linux user wants to make his own virus, he can go ahead and do that for himself, just theoretically. So, yes, you theoretically could have a virus for Linux, but unless he runs it as the root user and wipes his own disk, it's only going to hurt him and nobody else, right? Okay. Now, the thing is the same diversity I was complaining about between Linux boxes, and in Ubuntu, this script for shaping my bandwidth will run without modification except for putting my IP number in there, but not in SUSE, and that's a problem. Well, on the other hand, it's not a problem for security because I'm kind of doing that to keep everybody safe. I'm having to run the which command and find out that it's in user sbin instead of just sbin. The TC command is located in a different spot, so I got to change the path of my script. I'm doing that for the safety of everybody else. And Slackware starts up differently than SUSE, and SUSE does it a little differently than Red Hat. So if a virus was written for Red Hat that depends on the fact that all these hard disks will mount automatically upon reboot, but SUSE doesn't allow that unless you know how to do this esoteric configuration most people aren't going to be able to overcome. It's not going to spread to the SUSE box. And so if we got 20% of the Linux users using SUSE, 20%, the same reason why vendors won't port their apps is the same reason why viruses won't spread. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the number of boxes out there and shooting for the lowest common shooting for the easiest target, which is Windows. Why? Because there are people out there that all they do is they root Linux boxes, and these are old boxes that haven't been patched. So the way it works is it isn't a complete system that's that would cause a user to be completely unaware of that requires the users to help out the people that are exploiting their software. It's a little more passive, so these people will send out scans, different commands to the computer to see what the computer answers, to find out, to get a fingerprint, to find out what kind of computer they're what kind of Linux or whatever it is that they're running, and then based on that they make a choice as to what kind of malware to send to it to try to create the buffer overflow that I already discussed, and then to gain root access, and then to use that computer to do whatever they want to do. Well, say my computer got rooted. Well, or one of my Ubuntu partition got rooted. Ubuntu is a bigger target, say, than maybe Fedora or SUSE, but it's still it's not out of proportion. But if that relies on, the PS command being in one location, and some other distribution has the PS command in another location, or the tar command, or whatever, or what have you, because what they do is they replace your binary files with their own Trojan version to have a full toolkit to do what they want to do. It's a slower, more meticulous process for the user to have to get from one machine to the a botnet this large of Linux users is inconceivable. Even if there was this many Linux users out in the real world, there still wouldn't be a botnet this large. Couldn't be. It probably wouldn't be a botnet. There might be a botnet of certain flavors or distributions of Linux, but not of, and it wouldn't have that kind of saturation of 97% of the desktop market. He goes on to talk about some other things like worms, which are really programs that are designed to run because a network is running. It doesn't really infect the Linux system. And there isn't going to be in all the supposed viruses that are out there, he says, that they don't just show up on your. I mean, there's a very large variety of email programs people choose to use when they communicate. It's not everybody's using Outlook Express. You've got your some people use Emacs, Pine, Mutt, Kmail, Evolution. And so maybe there might be a security vulnerability to exploit in Evolution, but it's not going to work when when that email gets somehow forwarded over to the user running Kmail, right? It's only going to affect the GNOME users, and then it's got to figure out a way to be able to send emails automatically, which means it has to root the system. And to root the system, someone's going to have to decide that they're going to execute the binary that comes attached with that email, because it isn't just going to run automatically. And if it does, how is it going to scale to my unique SendMail configuration? I could be using SendMail, I could be using XM, I could be using Postfix, I could be using one of 3 different mail transfer agents. It could try to make its own mail transfer agent. That would solve that problem, I guess, but still, it's going to have to, and then maybe I'm in GNOME, or maybe I'm in KDE. I mean, the fragmentation really makes it formidable, so it just really isn't worth anybody's effort. Even among like distributions, I could be using KDE. Half the SUSE users could be using KDE. The other half could be using GNOME. And GNOME has a different layout than KDE, as I've complained about. So if you want security, yeah, you can do this. Also, if you want security, you can pick an operating system that's absolutely esoteric but great for surfing the internet. And I guess with the exception of Flash, which may be a mute issue later. Haiku is great. You can install Haiku just on your thumb drive. There's excellent instructions at the Haiku OS site. You can buy a thumb drive for that, and you can just run Haiku off of it. Haiku takes about 10 seconds to boot, literally. I have a video of it. Maybe not even that. You can get on the net very quickly. You can browse, do your research, and not worry about your computer becoming a part of a botnet. It's another way to do it responsibly. On the other hand, if you're surfing the net with Windows, I can't even sit here. I've done some net surfing with Windows. I can't even tell you that my computer isn't compromised. I have a virus checker. I have the Safe Surf. It doesn't mean my computer isn't. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like any site that I've gone to has been the result of a search that's come up useless. But now I know if that ever happens, might as well just wipe the disk. And also having Linux in a doable situation is going to give you that resiliency. Let me stop.